Pardon me, but it appears my car is experiencing some issues. We advise you to settle your remaining balance promptly. Failure to do so will result in your card remaining inactive. What? The customer service representative from the card company did mention an outstanding balance. It seems the payment for my usual credit card hasn't been processed yet. But why? Should have a significant amount saved in the account designated for automatic payments. However, upon checking my bank balance, it shows $0. The only other individual with access to withdraw funds from it would be my husband. With a sense of urgency, I reached for my mobile phone and swiftly reported to the police. I'm Garnett Felton, 30 years old, and I operate as a freelance web designer, setting my own tempo. Thanks to the flexibility of my job, I frequently meet clients face-to-face despite the option of virtual meetings. Though virtual interactions are feasible, I find that direct communication better conveys my concepts. As deadlines loom, I immerse myself in work, sacrificing sleep for productivity. My ability to sustain this pace is largely due to the unwavering support of my husband Thomas, whom I married just a year ago. A couple of years ago, when I was tasked with a project at a company, he was the liaison I dealt with. We dated for a year and a half before tying the knot. Following our wedding, he relocated to my apartment. However, a significant issue has emerged in my life revolving around Thomas's parents. They have a lax approach to finances and often find themselves strapped for cash. Thomas and I divide our living costs evenly. Given my higher income, I typically cover all expenses for the month, with him reimbursing me half at the start of the subsequent month. However, when I mentioned this month's expenses to Thomas as usual, he seemed annoyed and remarked, "Look, money's a bit tight right now. Can I settle my share of the living expenses after my next paycheck?" What do you mean by tight? I'm only asking for half of the living expenses. Yeah, I get that, but I'm completely strapped until my next payday. What do you mean? It's only been 10 days since you got paid. His evasiveness and reluctance to clarify started to irk me. His deliberate ambiguity prompted me to delve deeper. Hey, can you please explain why you can't pay properly? And what's this about assisting your parents? Well, you see, is there something you're suspicious about? No, not at all. I simply assisted my mom and dad. Assisted? Yeah, they mentioned they were facing some difficulties, so I sent them some money. Thomas's parents were supposed to be financially stable. My father-in-law held a full-time job, while my mother-in-law worked part-time. So, why did they suddenly require financial assistance? This question had been nagging at me, and I couldn't shake it. Why do your parents need financial support if they're both employed? This hasn't been necessary in the past. I've been assisting them for a while now. They recently requested an increase in the amount, starting this month. You didn't actually agree to increase the amount, did you? Yes, I did. Though the issue of helping one's parents in need is understandable, I couldn't help but feel unsettled by this revelation. All right, just ensure you settle your share when you receive your paycheck at the end of the month. Agreed. My husband has a stubborn streak that's hard to break once he's made up his mind. While I adore him, his trait does lead to some challenges. I knew trying to reason further wouldn't sway him, and apologies weren't exactly his forte. So, I opted to refrain from pushing the issue and waited patiently till the next payday. Since that incident, he's been consistently finding excuses to avoid contributing to our household expenses. And when he does chip in, it's only a fraction of what's needed. It's been nearly 6 months of him refusing to pull his weight. While we're technically still married, my patience is wearing thin. Not only am I covering all the bills, but I'm also responsible for all the household chores. Reflecting on this situation left me feeling foolish and overwhelmed with a sense of emptiness. One late night, he stumbled in, his cheeks flushed from alcohol. Unable to contain my frustration, I raised my voice. Why did you call if you were going to be out drinking? I made dinner and waited for you. Sorry. A colleague unexpectedly invited me out. But couldn't you have sent a message? I've asked you before to keep me informed. It's not fair to leave me hanging. Don't start yelling the moment I walk in. It's not welcoming. What do you mean? Why am I the one being blamed? He shot me a look of disdain as if I were in the wrong. His attitude infuriated me, and I confronted him. How can you afford to go drinking when you can't even contribute to our bills? I can enjoy a drink occasionally. I'm exhausted from working every day. So am I. I handle all the household chores. If you can't contribute anymore, can't we stop sending money to your parents? What? Why? That's my family's business. It's not your concern. And what about us, Thomas? Aren't we family too? What am I to you, living here with you after we got married? This is so irritating. What does it matter? You earn more than I do anyway. Why does he feel so entitled? The only reason Thomas can live comfortably is because I'm shouldering all the expenses. Would a simple thank you or sorry for the inconvenience be too much to ask? I was left speechless by his irrational arguments. I couldn't fathom his arrogance. Given our escalating tempers, I realized a rational conversation was unlikely and suggested, let's revisit this tomorrow. The following day, while preparing dinner and awaiting his return, I heard the front door creak open. Welcome home, I called out, but received no response. Then the living room door swung open, and in walked my husband with his parents. Mom, Dad, what brings you here? With a smug grin, my husband interjected, my parents have something they want to discuss with you. To discuss with me? Come on, Mom and Dad, let's get to the point. Prompted by my husband, my father-in-law began to look apologetic. Apologies for the sudden visit. We've come to talk about the financial support Thomas has been providing us. What's this about? Oh, Ernest, could you please ease up on Thomas? Surprised, I blurted out, what? I was completely bewildered. Then my mother-in-law, who had remained silent, spoke up. Garnett, Thomas has been sending us money each month, thinking of our well-being. It's unfair for you to accuse him. What are you saying? Accusations. All I'm asking for is our living expenses to be managed properly. Listen, Garnett, I hate to bring this up, but we're practically family, aren't we? If your own family were struggling, wouldn't you lend a hand? What? That's what anyone would expect, right? Your father-in-law and I have been experiencing financial strain lately, so we rely on Thomas to continue supporting us. Therefore, you should handle all the living expenses for both of you. It seemed they assumed it was only natural for me to shoulder all the costs. Unable to tolerate it any longer, I lashed out. Enough is enough. What do you think I've been doing? Managing all the household chores and covering every living expense. How is that fair? Isn't it what married couples do? Support each other, right? Or are you just that selfish? Upon hearing his mother's taunt, my husband, sitting beside me, couldn't suppress a chuckle. That evening, despite my efforts to reason, they remained obstinate. They finally departed well past 9 p.m. Once they were gone, my husband abruptly handed me signed divorce papers. In disbelief, I questioned, "What's this?" "It means exactly what it says," he retorted. Peering down at me, he declared, "If you persist in defying me, I'll end our marriage." "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. If you don't want a divorce, then simply obey. Your role is to follow, not lead." I knew I should have stood my ground, but I felt utterly drained. Perhaps trying to reason with Thomas before the situation worsened was futile. Perhaps divorce was the only option. The decision was swift. The following day, I signed the divorce papers Thomas had given me and headed to City Hall. The documents were processed, and just like that, I was single once more. Now that I'm finally liberated, I'll soon find my own place and embrace independent living. Feeling rejuvenated, I opted to indulge myself with a shopping trip to the department store. Working predominantly from home with outings limited to client meetings, it had been quite some time since I splurged on myself, especially given the recent strain of covering all expenses. Today, however, I've decided to treat myself. With that resolve, I ventured into the women's clothing section. After trying on a couple of dresses, I settled on 2 favorites. At the checkout, as I handed over my credit card, the cashier's troubled expression caught my attention. I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems we're unable to process this card." "What? That's impossible. I've used it recently to purchase a new tablet for work without any issues. Why the sudden problem now?" Racing home, I dialed the card company's number. Upon explaining the situation to the operator, she delivered startling news. "We require immediate payment of the outstanding balance, or your card will be rendered unusable." Outstanding balance. Indeed, last month, we were unable to debit your card usage from your account. Is this plausible? Please verify your bank account balance. After ending the call, I swiftly accessed my bank account online, the very account from which my card draws funds. Initially reserved for personal savings, it now solely serves my card transactions. If memory serves, there should be $5 million within, but the balance reads 0. Just before the card's due date, the entire $5 million had been withdrawn. What on earth was happening? A chilling suspicion gripped me. Could it have been Thomas? But who else had access? Our bank book and ATM card were stored together, only accessible to the both of us, meaning Thomas was the only other person who could have withdrawn from my account. I waited for his return, then confronted him. "Hey, did you withdraw money from my account?" He smirked, let out an exasperated sigh, and replied, clearly irritated. "Oh, you figured it out. Thought I did a pretty good job of covering my tracks, huh? I can't believe this. Why would you do that?" "Why? For my parents, of course. I gave them your $5 million. What did you just say?" "Just as I said, they needed financial support. Fortunately, I have the means to provide it." Speechless, he began to explain, his tone tinged with pride. It appeared his parents had developed an obsession with online shopping. They were purchasing items they fancied, far exceeding their income. Initially, they turned to Thomas for assistance. However, as their spending spiraled out of control, they began to demand more. They started purchasing multiples of the same items, gifting them to neighbors. Before they knew it, their monthly expenses surpassed $500,000, a sum Thomas couldn't manage alone. So, he withdrew the $5 million from my account. After he finished explaining, he remarked, "You shouldn't complain. They're your family too. Consider it looking after them. Don't make a fuss over a mere $5 million. In that moment, I found myself dialing the police on my cell. "Hello, police. I want to report a break-in and theft. My address is..." Thomas watched me with wide eyes as I ended the call. He shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? Did you just call the police?" "Police? Why wouldn't I? There's been a break-in and theft, right?" "Calling it theft is exaggerating. This is my house," I firmly reminded a flustered Thomas. "We're no longer a couple. In fact, I'm the one renting this place, so technically, it's not your home, is it? We're not together anymore, remember? The divorce papers you signed yesterday, I'd already submitted them. So in other words, this is my place and you're just a stranger here, an intruder, right? You've got to be kidding me. Call them back and cancel the report." Waving my phone angrily at him, I warned, "If you lay a finger on me, I'll call the cops again. Just so you know, they're already on their way. You can't escape now. Why don't you just admit what you've done?" "Whoa, hold on. We loved each other, didn't we? How did it come to this?" "Love each other?" I scoffed. "Don't try to feed me that nonsense. Whose fault do you think all of this is? It all began because you blindly supported your irresponsible parents. You can't just act recklessly and expect forgiveness. Who would forgive someone as despicable as you? What a fool." "Fool? Do you even know who you're talking to?" "I'm talking to you. Like parents, like child. Because you were raised by parents who were careless with money, you think it's acceptable to deplete someone else's savings. I hope the police give you a stern lecture and you feel the weight of those $5 million. Just then, the police arrived and Thomas crumbled on the spot. "Who's the suspect?" Pointing at my husband, now cowering on the floor, I said, "It's him, without a doubt." "All right, let's go. You'll need to come in for questioning," the officer commanded. All I wanted was to support my parents, but my pleas fell on deaf ears, and Thomas was escorted away by the police. However, the authorities deemed the incident a civil matter, explaining they couldn't intervene. Determined to seek justice, I sought legal assistance and demanded compensation for the misappropriation of my $5 million in savings, along with damages totaling $6 million. Naturally, Thomas and his parents couldn't afford such a sum. In the end, all three found themselves drowning in debt. Despite their financial woes, his parents continued their reckless spending habits, accruing even more debt. They eventually resorted to borrowing from loan sharks, living in constant fear of relentless debt collectors, desperately trying to remain unseen. On the contrary, I made the bold decision to sever all ties with Thomas and relocated to a new apartment. Fortunately, my career began to thrive, and my income surpassed my wildest expectations. Since parting ways with Thomas, everything in my professional life fell into place. In hindsight, I regret not divorcing him sooner. Despite the failure of my marriage, I recognized that my life was far from over. Taking lessons from this experience, I resolved to exercise greater caution in my future endeavors. Melissa felt really sad after her grandma passed away. She missed her a lot. Her grandma used to say that everything would be okay and that she believed in Melissa. Those were some of the last things her grandma said before she died. Melissa and her grandma lived together since Melissa was born. She never knew her parents and didn't want to make her grandma sad by asking about them. Melissa thought maybe her parents left her because they had other things to do. Lots of people visited Melissa's grandma. Some were nice and some were not. Melissa would stay in her room when they came over because she didn't want to bother them. She knew her grandma was helping them with things. As Melissa got older, she started to understand more about the world. She realized it was different from what she thought before. Melissa thought her grandma knew a lot of things that others didn't, and as she grew up, she started to understand those things too. Sometimes it made her cry because it was scary. One day, Melissa was crying in her room again. Her grandma heard her and came in quietly to see if she was okay. Melissa said she was fine, so her grandma came in and asked what was wrong. Melissa told her grandma that she was scared. Her grandma gave her a hug and asked why she was scared. Melissa told her grandma everything. Her grandma hugged her tightly and said she was worried this might happen, that Melissa would inherit her gift. After her grandma passed away, Melissa didn't know what to do. She was only 15 and worried she would have to go to an orphanage and then to a foster home. Melissa didn't want that, so she decided to run away and hide somewhere far away. She didn't know why she made that decision, but she hoped it would work out somehow. Mr. Wesley Harris kissed his daughter on the forehead and promised to come home earlier. Chelsea sighed and told her dad it was okay for him to be at work a lot. She reassured him that she would be fine. Wesley suggested having a movie night to cheer her up. Chelsea agreed with her dad, saying she'd be okay and wanted to talk to him about something. "What is it, sweetheart?" Mr. Harris asked. Chelsea asked if they could try to find someone. "Are you sure, honey?" her father asked, concerned. Chelsea didn't want a caregiver who only did medical stuff and treated her like a kid. She wanted someone she could talk to. She didn't like the nurses from agencies because they felt fake and cold, like robots following rules. She wanted someone real. Wesley kissed his daughter again and promised to find a solution. As he went to work, he couldn't shake off how strange life had become. Just 5 years ago, he had a happy family, but now his wife had died in a car crash, and his daughter was seriously ill and bedridden. Despite spending a lot on her medicine, Chelsea's health was deteriorating, and the doctors weren't hopeful. At first, Chelsea's illness wasn't so scary. She got treatment and seemed like any other kid, but things took a turn for the worse. Chelsea started losing weight fast and became very weak. It had been a year, and she could barely leave her bed. Lately, she'd been in more pain, and it broke Wesley's heart to see her suffer. Despite doctors' prescriptions, the painkillers didn't seem to help much, and Chelsea was becoming resistant to stronger ones. When Wesley arrived at work, his driver asked if he could leave early because his wife was being discharged from the hospital. "Congratulations. Of course, go ahead. Let me know if you need anything," Wesley said. The driver thanked him and asked if he could take a day off tomorrow. "Sure, take it. By the way, is it a boy or a girl?" "It's a girl. We named her Melissa." Wesley smiled and complimented the name Melissa. He wished his driver congratulations again and headed to his office. Despite the bustling activity around him, life seemed dull and dreary at home. While others celebrated weddings and births, his family silently waited for what would come next. The hardest part for Wesley was staying strong and not crumbling under the weight of it all. He tried his best to support Chelsea and smiled as much as he could. Chelsea was smart and mature, handling her condition remarkably well. But it pained Wesley to see her confined to her bed, knowing there was little hope for improvement. His secretary interrupted his thoughts, asking him to sign some papers. "Andy, I need your help. I'm looking for someone to spend time with my daughter. Not from an agency, someone real." "That's tricky. Maybe someone her age or someone in need of a place to stay," Andy suggested. "Yeah, we could try that. Okay, give me the papers," Wesley said, ready to explore this idea. Wesley finished his work early to keep his promise to Chelsea. He decided to stop by a convenience store to buy her some sweets, even though the housekeeper and doctor said she shouldn't have sugar. Wesley knew a chocolate bar would make her happy, even if it wasn't the healthiest choice. As he left the store, he noticed a girl standing outside who seemed troubled. Despite not looking homeless, Wesley felt she needed help. He approached her and asked if she needed assistance. The girl was initially scared but then smiled and asked for some spare change. She explained she was out of money and hungry. Wesley spotted a nearby restaurant and offered to buy her some food. "Thank you so much, sir. This is really embarrassing," the girl said. "No need to feel embarrassed. Let's get you something to eat, Wesley replied kindly. As they walked to the restaurant, Wesley couldn't help but think about the girl's age. She seemed to be about 15 or 16, just like his daughter Chelsea. But there was something in her eyes that made her seem older. The girl ate eagerly, and watching her made Wesley hungry too. Suddenly, he had an idea. "I'm sorry, I never asked your name," Wesley said. "I'm Melissa," the girl replied. "Melissa, where are your parents? Do you live with them?" Melissa paused. "I don't really know them. I used to live with my grandma in a trailer park, but she passed away 7 months ago, so I moved to the city." "Do you have somewhere to stay?" Wesley asked. Melissa shrugged. "I was staying with my grandma's friend for a while, helping out around the house, but then her kids took her to another city." "So, you're saying you have nowhere to go?" Wesley asked. Melissa nodded. "I guess not. Would you like to come live with us? I have a daughter," Wesley offered. "Is she sick?" "How do you know?" Melissa asked, surprised. Melissa noticed Wesley's confusion and explained how she figured out he had a daughter who was sick. "You're pretty sharp. How old are you?" Wesley asked. "I'll be 16 soon," Melissa replied. "Do you have any identification with you?" Wesley inquired. "It's at the mall nearby. A nice janitor lets me keep my stuff there. Sometimes I help him clean and he lets me stay," Melissa explained. Wesley considered the situation. He liked Melissa. "So, what do you think? Want to come live with us? We have a nurse and a housekeeper. My daughter just needs someone to talk to," Wesley offered. "I understand. Yeah, I can do that," Melissa agreed. "You barely know me, yet you agreed to come with me," Wesley remarked. "Don't worry, I trust you," Melissa replied. "How much do you think I should pay you?" Wesley asked. "You don't have to pay me anything," Melissa said, kindly declining. Wesley thought Melissa was very innocent and genuine. They were in a car, driving past the bright lights of the city, and Melissa was gazing out the window. Wesley saw this as an opportunity to discuss his daughter. "So, Melissa, let me tell you about Chelsea." "You don't really have to. If she wants to, she'll share her story with me when she's ready," Melissa replied. Wesley agreed with a nod. He was still perplexed and curious about where Melissa had actually come from. When they got to his house, Wesley first showed Melissa her bedroom. She really liked it. "It's beautiful. I've never had a bed like that. Make yourself at home. You can unpack while I step out for a bit," Wesley said. Melissa was thrilled with her own bedroom. She meticulously unpacked her belongings and arranged her clothes tightly in the closet. After finishing, Melissa silently left her room and walked into the hallway where Wesley was walking towards her. He stopped and said that it was time for her to meet Chelsea. Chelsea was sitting in her bed, looking out the window. "Hey, honey." Chelsea slowly turned around and smiled. "Hey, Dad." "Melissa, this is my daughter, Chelsea, and Chelsea, this is Melissa." Wesley introduced them. "Nice to meet you, Melissa," Chelsea said, looking at Melissa with great interest. "She is a really nice young lady. I'm sure you will get along well and make really good friends," Wesley added. "All right, you two go ahead and get to know each other. I'll go change," Wesley said. Melissa slowly walked over to Chelsea's bed and looked at her without saying anything. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Chelsea replied. Chelsea could feel that Melissa was looking deep into her soul. She had a weird feeling. Chelsea was a bit frightened and looked at Melissa, but then Melissa smiled. "Don't be scared. Everything's gonna be all right," Melissa said. Gradually, the awkward tension between them subsided, and they started talking. By the time Wesley came back, Chelsea was laughing. As he walked in and saw them, he froze. He hadn't seen her beaming and heard this laughter for the last couple of years. Melissa was telling her how her grandma would have herbal teas every time to make her memory better. She kept losing her shiny things and thought that she was forgetting them somewhere, and it turned out that a magpie was flying in and stealing them. "Are you guys having fun?" Chelsea turned to her dad and said, "We are." With that, Wesley said that dinner would be ready in an hour. He was expecting a refusal from his daughter as usual. This time, Chelsea said, "Dad, do you think we can move my bed to the kitchen? I want to eat there." Wesley was shocked. "Of course, honey. Let me get the chair instead." They had purchased a special chair for her a long time ago, but Chelsea never used it. She had totally been against it. Wesley instructed the housekeeper to prepare a table for 3 people, which surprised her. However, when she noticed Chelsea chatting animatedly with another girl, she quickly got to work. Chelsea couldn't eat a lot, but she had a hearty appetite. It was peculiar and uncommon. It was the first time she ate well. For a brief moment, Wesley began to question what the doctors had told him, but he realized that doctors from 3 different countries can be wrong at the same time. Before going to bed, Melissa noticed that Chelsea was curled up in pain. "Melissa, can you call the housekeeper? I need a shot," Chelsea said. But Melissa walked up to Chelsea and put her palm on top of her head. After a minute, Chelsea began to feel that the pain was subsiding. She had never felt anything like that before. She wanted to ask how Melissa was doing that, but she couldn't. Her eyes were drooping, and she felt like she was falling asleep. Melissa stood up to shut the door and saw the housekeeper hurrying to give Chelsea a shot. "Excuse me, ma'am, she's better. She fell asleep." "What do you mean she's sleeping? What about the housekeeper appeared inside and saw Chelsea was indeed asleep. "That's impossible." 2 weeks passed, and Chelsea had changed a lot. Wesley was astonished. He saw how Melissa was leading her by the hand carefully. For the first time in the last few years, Chelsea got out into the yard. Wesley couldn't believe what he was seeing, but he was still wary that it could be something temporary. "Mr. Harris, where did you find this girl?" the housekeeper asked. "You won't believe it, but I met her on the street outside a store." "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine. I mean, I don't know how to say this, but she's a bit strange. She knows everything. The other day she predicted that it was going to rain in 10 minutes. She told me that my son's sore throat needs to be treated with some kind of herb. I mean, look how much Chelsea has changed. Are you telling me she's some kind of clairvoyant or something?" "I don't know. I don't really believe those things, but I just don't understand how." Wesley smiled, but he agreed with the housekeeper. Melissa had a piercing gaze. In the morning, Wesley was getting ready for work. Melissa walked out to him from her room. "Mr. Harris, do you have to go to work today?" "Yes. Is everything okay? Can you stay home today, please?" "Why, Melissa? What's going on?" "I have a lot of things to do at the office." Melissa kept begging him not to go anywhere and to tell his driver to stay in the city today. Wesley didn't know why he agreed to listen to her. In the end, he decided he could probably work from home today. When he turned on the TV, he saw that there was a terrible accident on the highway involving a dozen cars. It happened exactly at the exit he was supposed to take and at around the time he usually passes through that area. He immediately got a call from his driver. The driver talked for a while and thanked Mr. Harris for letting him stay in the city today. Wesley got up and headed for Melissa's room. He couldn't take it anymore. He really wanted to know who she really was. He knocked on her door, but there was no response. Then he walked towards Chelsea's room, and as he was approaching, he heard loud noises. They were arguing about something. He stood behind a slightly open door and looked through. Melissa was shouting at Chelsea. "Get up now." "I can't." "Who told you you can't?" "But I'm really sick. I can't walk." "I'm not supposed to walk." "But you're still alive. Give me your hand." Wesley froze because Chelsea put her right foot on the floor, then the left, and then she got up. She wobbled immediately, and Wesley was about to lunge, but Melissa had already had her shoulder up for her. "There you go. Good job, Chelsea," Melissa told her. "And you were telling me you were destined to be in bed." Chelsea burst out laughing.